Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to read a quick statement from the Police Reform Guide. On June 12, 2020, the governor signed an executive order requiring each local government in the state to adopt a policing reform plan by April 1st, 2021. The order authorizes the director of the Division of Budget to condition state aid to localities on the adoption of such a plan. Collaborative is a key word. It would be a mistake to frame these discussions as an adversarial process or an effort to impose top-down solutions. Issues must be aired, but solutions must be crafted. The collaborative process should review the needs of the community served by its police agency and evaluate the department's current policies and procedures, or practices, I'm sorry. Establish policies that allow police to effectively and safely perform their duties, involve the entire community in the discussion, develop policy recommendations resulting in this review, and offer a plan for public comment. Present the plan to the local legislative body to ratify and adopt it, and certify adoption of the plan to the state budget director on and before April 1st, 2021. So that's our charge. Our format in Columbia County, we chose 30 community members from different parts of the county. We tried to make it geographically diverse, and also we wanted to make it ethnically diverse. So we have 30 members. I think approximately, we had 32 members, and 30 actually, when tonight is done, will have given their testimony in terms of their views. Once those panels are done, there's going to be a law enforcement and elected officials panel where we're going to take the information that you've imparted on us, and we're going to look at our policies and procedures, look at some ideas programmatically, and develop a plan to put forward which reinforces some of the work that the police agencies are doing and or changes some of the work or improves on it. And then there's finally a plan review committee, which will include 7 community members, which will review the work that's done by the law enforcement and elected officials panel. And that would be put forward by that panel to for the public hearing, which again, the public will have an opportunity to give input on the plan. We've tried to make this a transparent and open process, hence these meetings being on YouTube, being recorded on YouTube, and actually minutes being taken as well. So everything has been transparent, everything has been upfront, and the next phase of this will also be transparent and on YouTube for anybody that wants to watch it. I want to introduce Mike Benvenuto, who's chair of the Columbia County Public Safety Committee of the Board of Supervisors. He's co-chair of this committee and has a lot of years of experience in law enforcement. And also Bill Hughes, who's a former supervisor and a community member. Bill has been a long time advocate of crucial conversations around issues such as these. So, so they're our co-chairs of the committee. And then I wanted to introduce our facilitator, Newell Eaton, who's been a facilitator and a consultant for many, many years, and has I think done a great job. So Newell, or actually Bill Hughes was going to say a few words. And
yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Chairman has outlined some of the processes that we have in place. One, we want to thank all the members that have participated and that will participate. But that comes to you, the audience. We want to let you know that in the audience, everyone has an opportunity to participate. Yes, we have 30 speakers that will offer their opinions, but you can submit questions. You can join the chat on YouTube. Submit questions to our website, and we just want to assure you that all that information is indeed gathered, and it is indeed passed on to the panel, and we review that information after the meeting, and a lot of that information will be passed on to the members of the next panel as well. So thank you for your participation, and know that we are paying attention.
Thanks, Bill. You know, first of all, I want to say it really is wonderful to see the amount of community interest that you're all demonstrating by all the different things you could be doing here tonight that you're choosing, those both of you who are choosing to present your ideas and your concerns, and also all of those of you who are listening in, that really it demonstrates the kind of community involvement that and interest that exists in Columbia County. So I really want to honor all of you for what you're choosing to do here this evening. And this, as Bill said, is part of the process. This is the third time we're really offering opportunities for a group of community members to speak about ideas that they might have about both what's going well, but also what might be used to really improve what's going on in Columbia County in this area. And so, because there are so many people and there's only so much time, it's my job as a facilitator to limit how much time each of you gets to present. And what we found is helpful is I'm using this old kind of beat the clock system, that what will happen is when you get to start speaking, I will start this up and you have 5 minutes to present whatever ideas you have within those 5 minutes. If there are more things you want to say or more things you want to present, we'll ask you to present those in writing later to the, in fact, we'd love if you have written out your comments to also present those to the committee, just in case we don't get the transcript just right. But this really is an opportunity for the public to hear, for you each to hear each other in terms of your ideas. So we're going to do this in a way where we're going to listen to a couple of you first. And then after that, we're going to take a short break because we know what happens after you've listened to 4 or 5 people. There's a part of our brain that kind of goes dead. So we're going to ask 4 of you to speak in 5-minute intervals. And I'm going to call out your names in a moment. Then we're going to take a 5-minute break and we'll move on to the next 3, a break, and then the final 3. That's the way it's going to kind of work in terms of this, which is exactly what we did the last 2 times. Okay. There any? Go ahead.
No, if I could, I was remiss. I did not introduce Sheriff Bartlett, who's also on this meeting, and he and his staff. And Sheriff has been on all 3 of these conferences and has actually answered questions and given input at the end. So welcome, Sheriff.
Right. And if we have time, we'll make space for that. Well, what I will ask each of you who are presenting, when you start, say your name and where you're located, okay? So that it's clear in the record, even though we may hear your voice, that might get lost in the flow. So the first 4, the first person is Gerina Ahmed. She'll be presenting from Hudson. Then Frank Van Etten from Ankrum. Then Phyllis Carrito from Kinderhook. And then Tess Markham from Hudson. And if I butchered your name, I really do apologize. It's amazing how what's written in paper versus what one would say sometimes don't have a good alignment. So let's hear from Gerina. Are you ready? Okay. And yes. By the way, I cannot. You each need to unmute yourself, but after 5 minutes, the way this system is set up, I can mute you. So, and I will if you go over your 5-minute mark. Okay, that's kind of what we've decided to make it fair for everybody. So, Gerina, you're up.
Can you guys hear me clearly?
Yes, you're good.
Okay.
Very good.
My name is Gerina Ahmed. I'm from Hudson. I just want to start off by saying that if at any point I sound angry, it's probably because I am angry. And if it sounds personal, it's probably because it is personal. The tension and distrust between people of color and the police in the United States is an underestimated public health crisis. It's difficult for our faith in the American justice system not to be challenged when we can't walk down the street, drive down a highway, go to an airport, or even enter our own homes without being stopped or killed because of the color of our skin. My immigrant husband came to the U.S. He got his driver's license. It was exciting, but despite the excitement that I felt, I had to have a conversation with him about getting pulled over. When he first got pulled over, I happened to be there. My baby, only 3 months old, is sitting in the back seat with my 14-year-old sister. 2 officers stepped out. Their guns were already pointed as they approached us. My husband immediately put his hands on the dashboard as I had instructed him earlier on that year. His voice shook as he tried to speak clear English, explain where he was going. I made a desperate attempt to translate, but the officers immediately shut me down. The reason for pullover that day was because they thought we had thrown something out of the window, which was not the case. I took the initiative to speak to several people of color in our community that had recent encounters with the police. And the main issue was that they did not understand their rights, what was going to happen to them, or what would happen to them in result of this arrest, mainly because they didn't speak English. This is why we need to implement language access initiatives, and we need policies to ensure that community members feel safe and heard when interacting with the police. On September 11th, 2020, a protest took place in the city of Hudson in response to backlash against rape and sexual assault survivors in the South Asian community of Hudson. The protest could have quickly gotten out of hand because police departments in our community cannot accept citizens performing their civil duties. Detective Finn stopped an organizer at this protest and expressed his frustration about the protest and found it offensive that a survivor of sexual abuse had the audacity to call the police to do their jobs and lock up her abuser. Police Chief Moore went as far as challenging protesters and speakers by saying that if they have the balls, they should come say these things to his face. This is the type of behavior that we do not hear about. This is the type of behavior that our local law enforcement engages in. And this is the type of behavior that is driving the wedge between community and police relations. It's arrogance and poor manners that need to be addressed. Also, police departments that are taking active role in federal enforcement initiatives like immigration will strain relationships between minority communities and the police. I would like to note that sanctuary policies do not prevent the federal government from doing its job. If they simply represent a decision to limit participation in ICE's work. The Columbia County Sheriff's Department joined New York's most anti-immigrant elected officials and law enforcement to actively and publicly campaign against restoring accesses to driver's license. But despite their failed efforts, I am proud to say that we did successfully implement these measures in Columbia County Motor Vehicle Department with the support of the Columbia County Sanctuary Department, the Sanctuary Movement. Columbia County Sheriff's Department has a hostile relationship with immigrant communities. They have called ICE on our community members and held them on ICE detainers at the county jail. Their support for the agency and its practice is an affront to the Constitution and an endorsement of unwanted search and seizures because ICE rarely obtains judicial warrants for arrests. I would like to repeat that again. ICE rarely obtains judicial warrants for arrest and routinely violates the rights of our community members by using civil detainers, which are not warrants. And our Columbia County Sheriff's Department assists in that. I am running out of time. I see that, but I will lastly add that I am unapologetic, but I am not irrational, which is why I will be forwarding a written submission to be reviewed by the panel that would include further details suggesting action steps, reforms, and policies. My suggestions include bias and fairness training, diversity training, mental health crisis training, de-escalation training and policies, police accountability protocols, non-collaboration initiatives with ICE, and language access initiatives. Thank you. Again, my name is Gerina Ahmed, and I'm from Hudson, New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerine. Your concerns have been heard. Let's see what we can do to be helpful there. Okay, next is Frank Van Etten. And you need to unmute yourself, Frank, okay?
Yes.
No, you're hard to hear.
Again.
Yes.
All right. I'll get started. My name is Frank Van Etten. I live in Ankrum, and thanks for having me on this panel today. It's going to be hard to be completely original, given all the great inputs that we have heard already in the previous sessions, but I've prepared some views aiming to add some different perspectives based on some personal experiences. I've traveled to 102 different countries, as well as every state in America, and have witnessed many different approaches to policing and varying levels of quality of the police as well. On a personal base, I'd say I'm grateful for the quality of the police I've experienced here in Columbia County, but I'm aware of different experiences and therefore keen to support today's discussion to seek for further improvements. First of all, in the last couple of weeks, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about the police in Columbia County. I've educated myself. I've listened carefully to what people had to say. And I did not fully realize how wide the scope of responsibilities and activities is that the police is actually responsible for. That includes cybercrime, violent crime, COVID, intervening in domestic issues, etc. I also was not 100% aware of how the conditions that the police is operating under are increasingly complex and challenging, whether that is an increase of issues with people with mental health issues, with weapons on the street, aggression towards the police, or also more visitors and permanent residents in this county, or the diversity in the community. Thirdly, I did not know what took place already. So beyond this panel, I've learned from the sheriff that, for instance, the training in his department is already exceeding the minimum requirements by far, that there are mechanisms to report incidents, and that these incidents are taken seriously. So the conclusion on this one is that I think it's a very complex matter, and I think there's a lot to get educated on. I wish I had all this knowledge prior to last month to develop my personal reflections. And I think that many community members would benefit from simply having more information on what the police is doing to get a better understanding. I don't think that it's just the responsibility of the police to educate people. That is also the responsibility of parents, of teachers. I would suggest if there's a way that teachers and police can work together on that, that would go a long way. When I lived in Holland and I was 7 or 8 years old, a police officer came to my classroom for an hour and she explained about her job and her responsibilities, and that went a long way, had a profound impact on me. So my second point I want to make is whenever you talk about improvements or there's a challenge around objectivity around these discussions, right? What is a benchmark? What is what we are striving for? And where do we stand today? And specifically in Columbia County, I still struggle to find out. We have personal experiences that people share here, but is there a more objective way of looking at this? And a lot of the things that I hear today are actually statewide or nationwide challenges, and that also creates opportunities to leverage what others are doing. So some of the things that we heard today should, I think, not be covered in isolation, but really leverage the debates, initiatives, and developments outside our county effectively as well to come to outcomes. The other point here is that I'm also interested to learn further from the sheriff. I have no doubt that the sheriff and his department are striving for the best results of efforts and are constantly looking for ways to improve, and we heard about that already. And I think we can learn more from him on what the challenges are that he and his department are currently experiencing to get to further progress, and what support he believes he needs to continue to deliver on these changing expectations of the community. We had a lot of people with opinions from the outside in, but I think listening to the sheriff in the last 2 sessions, I learned that there's a lot of things already taking place, and I would love to hear more. Lastly, I think my third point would be clearly there is a lot of improvements that the police can do. In any case, that requires sufficient funding. Without sufficient funding, all these initiatives are going to be very hard, whether it's visibility, whether it's additional training, whether it's more resources. So I hope we are making sure there is sufficient funding and that these fundings are clearly also used appropriately. But the second piece is what is it that the public can do? I think it would help tremendously if we can start with the starting point where all members of the community respect the uniform, but also hold each other accountable when someone in your direct environment doesn't show that respect. Moreover, when in contact with the police, understand you should cooperate and accept their authority. It's inherent to the position of the police in our society, in fact, everywhere in the world that I've seen. And lastly, we can also develop a tolerance to imperfections. No one is perfect, but let's remain constructive addressing these imperfections like we're doing in these panels today. And I know that some people have a skeptical view on how much the public can really achieve in making a meaningful impact, but I don't think there's a need for a skeptical view there. This is a solution where the public is directly in control, it costs nothing, and it will benefit instantly if you do this well. So the hurdle to consider this is actually very low. So to finish, I want to thank, first of all, the men and women in uniform for what they're currently doing and their openness for the discussions that are taking place. And I also want to thank all the fellow panel members for their contributions, as I was able to learn a lot, and the facilitators for keeping us all on time. Thank you, Newell.
Thank you, Frank. And that was Frank Van Etten from Ankrum. I realize I need to keep reminding folks to say your name and where you're from. Phyllis Carrito from Kinderhook, you're up next.
Fix the time, yeah.
Let me give her some time back. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Phyllis Carrito. I've been living in Kinderhook for the past 6 years and in Columbia County for over 40 years. My 2 children grew up here. I can only speak to you from my experiences and with respect and certainly recognizing that others have different experiences. I retired after 22 years from Columbia Green Community College, my final position being academic dean. That position afforded me the opportunity to work with the criminal justice programs, both the associate degrees and Zone 14. I know that many efforts were put in place to prepare the future law enforcement officers through those programs. I also worked alongside the deputies assigned to Columbia Green, and I was always appreciative of their support. I believe their presence, which is different than a resource officer in elementary or high school, as college students are adults, was positive in interacting with all our students, and especially students in crisis. The deputies cooperated with the administrators and counselors, with us taking the lead, and then they having our back and being ready to protect staff or students as necessary. I personally have been trained and as a certified mediator and created and teach a conflict resolution course, and I have facilitated conflict management. Through these interactions, I recognize the power of clearer communication and increased ability to be an active listener. It is a skill we can all benefit from. Being in this third panel of participants, I know we have already heard many ideas and concerns from the first 2 panels and then some earlier this evening. Instead of echoing those, I would like to share with you an example of success. It's about my son, who worked for the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. His job was to go into clubs in different states that were having difficulties. He always initiated that club members would participate weekly in volunteering in their community. And in each club area, he befriended local police and worked closely with them to get to know the children and to assist in keeping, for example, gangs away from the young people learning to navigate their world. He brought success to those clubs with all initiatives that help young people and law enforcement to interact positively together. So I know that that can be done. And starting with youth, I think, is one of the keys to building success. I would highly recommend ongoing training and skill building in conflict de-escalation that would support the police to do their job and the community in expressing their needs. I see as most important transparency, positive communication, and continuous education and training. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. In Olympia, Washington, Camden, New Jersey, and other state police areas, other states, police areas, community and police are working together with training and crisis response. The possibility is here for us to be leaders in this transitional time. I thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel and voice my opinion.
Thank you, Phyllis Carrito. And you are from Kinderhook, correct?
Kinderhook.
Did I get that right? Okay, very good. And next we're going to hear from Tess Markham from Hudson. You're going to need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Gotcha.
Let me give you time though first.
Okay. Sorry for the miscommunication, but I'm actually from Valatia.
Okay. Here we go. We'll fix that. Go ahead.
All right. So hello, I'm Tismark Boham, and I live in Valatia. I'm a senior at Ichabod Crane High School. First, I want to thank everyone. I'm honored to have been chosen to represent the students of Columbia County. So far, throughout the meetings, the first 2 meetings and tonight, I've heard many great ideas about reform from different people, and I'm excited to see these initiatives put in place. Tonight, I would like to share my perspective as a teenager living through these tough times. First, not much happens here in Valatia, so luckily I have not seen any violent acts firsthand, but seeing murders on the news is frustrating and angers me, and I can't imagine how those close to the trauma feel. I think it's important that we don't blame rioters. because we have to understand that when people are angry, they rarely act rationally. The key from here on out is not to put blame on anyone, but focus instead on the solutions that we've already brought up. As far as this teenage experience, when I see a police officer or red and blue lights at all, I feel scared. I know that it's the same for many fellow teens and all Black people in this country, and all Black people of color in this country, but this fear is one problem that we need to get rid of. Community outreach will hopefully help. Returning to tasers instead of lethal weapons should help, knowing that I won't die if there's any miscommunication. And seeing the positive work that the police do would also be beneficial. I feel like there's a common idea around all police that their work is violent, which could be contributing to this level of fear. Most importantly, we have to teach each other not to fear one another in hopes of a peaceful future. Within my generation, I see a much greater tolerance for all types of people, and it's very promising. If we can teach each other and future generations the same message of acceptance and togetherness, then it'll be easier to de-escalate all situations, and there will be less violence and hatred all around. I guess my main message is that we should do what we can to get these police reform initiatives through the system, but also focus on what we're doing as individuals to fix policing for the future. Thank you again for the opportunity to share my views.
Thank you, Tess Mark. Very, very nice hearing your point of view. We're going to take a 5-minute break. So set your clocks. I'll set this one. Although it seems like Siri thinks I need to say something else. And then we'll come back and we'll hear from Phyllis Carrito next. Okay? 5-minute break. Everybody.
Hey there, Malcolm. Sorry
Hi, I'm Phyllis Granite. I'm a longtime resident of Hillsdale. I'm a New York State certified mediator also. And I'm honored to be among such a diverse and dedicated group of community leaders. I'm glad I'm in the last group because it gave me more time to review the information, to solicit input from others and hear what all of you had to say. Times and demographics have changed, and social media has accelerated and highlighted these changes. Cultural divides exist, but bias is not limited to just racial or ethnic differences, however. The current policies and procedures need to be reviewed in the context of how they address the particular needs of our diverse community today, and how can we improve on them. Certain things stood out to me, and they also gave rise to a number of questions. And the first issue for me was training. Improved and updated training should be a major component of any plan, but this is tied to budgeting and scheduling, and that is the elephant in the room. There has been no budget increase for the last 3 years, and most deputies have only the most basic academy training and receive little in dealing with domestic or quality of life issues. The police PowerPoint presentation states that mandatory training is normally conducted annually. My question is, what training was offered this year and last year? How many people participated in those trainings? And as stated, these trainings are often restricted to those that are offered free, and those are through a variety of sources. It seems that our tax base seems to be increasing with so many new residents moving in. New homes are being built, and there are many additions to existing properties. Perhaps this will help offset the loss of our revenue and allow for increasing our budgets. Additionally, due to contractual mandates, police, and here I refer to all law enforcement, they cannot be mandated to attend training on their own time. Training can thus only take place when their shift is on, when they are on duty. Thus, others have to cover when someone is in training. This means more overtime. What process can lead to change in these procedures? Change is crucially needed here. Right now, much of the overtime funding comes from grants, but most of these involve car safety issues. It should be noted, however, that this does represent a large share of police calls and attention. Training, however, in implicit bias awareness, restorative justice practices, community-based outreach, and conflict resolution all need to be offered and made mandatory. The most basic listening skills need to be rethought and reinforced. We all typically react rather than listen. As a mediator, I have worked with a number of agencies that provide these training and also services that benefit the community. Many are offered free. As an example, Common Ground offers services to Columbia County, and over the summer they offered a series of free community support circles. Law enforcement refers cases to them. Over the summer, I also participated in 2 seminars given by NYSTRA, which is the New York State Alternative Dispute Resolution Association. And these were given by Growing a New Heart, and it was part of community mobilization programs. They specifically dealt with issues that have arisen in our country regarding police and racial issues. I'll provide the panel with more information on these separately. Options are therefore available for training if scheduling issues can be resolved. Grants can also we could also hopefully find additional funding for grants. A second area, and I have to talk fast now, that needs addressing is the overlapping or duplication of services. This has already been brought up. According to the police material, there are a number of programs in which reallocating funds is not feasible. Others, however, should be reviewed. An example is the Mobile Crisis Assessment Team, which works closely with the Mental Health Association. They are an invaluable resource for the police and the community. They have expanded their mission, and they believe in fair treatment and justice for all. Interestingly, with an emphasis on health-centered approach to criminal justice, New York City has just this week announced a pilot program involving 911 calls. I'd like to know how our county deals with 911 calls? What is the training involved? I see I'm finished, so I'll have to continue another time.
Phyllis, yes, submit your, the rest of your, if you have other things to say, submit them to us,
Yes,
please.
I didn't realize I should have talked much faster, so.
That's okay. Thank you.
I will submit on the rest of my statement online.
Newell, you're muted, Newell.
And Phyllis, you're from Hillsdale, correct? Is that correct?
Hillsdale, New York, yes.
Okay. Next, we're going to hear from William Vick from Stuyvesant. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, welcome.
Okay. My name is Bill Vick. I'm from the town of Stuyvesant. I was born and brought up in the city of Hudson, and I've lived in the town of Stuyvesant for 42 years. I'm a retired member of the Columbia County Sheriff's Office, and I served a little over 24 and a half years. Hudson City School District School Safety and Security Officer, and I was a criminal investigation for New York State Department of Taxation and Finance for 15 years. After reviewing the governor's guidelines for police, I believe that the Columbia County Sheriff's Office meets or exceeds all the governor's standards for all the divisions, including the road patrol, building securities, jail, and the civil department. I'm not saying this because I am a retired member. I'm saying this because the department is an accredited department by the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services. This is an intense, independent review of the department. There is a thorough review of the practices, procedures, and training. This keeps the department up to date on the latest trends in law enforcement and criminal justice. The unfortunate part about a lot of departments that are accredited is a lot of times they go down and the accreditation isn't continued because of lack of funds and because of manpower restraints. I'm hoping that Columbia County, now that they have this accredited program, that they will continue to do that and it will be continued funded because it does keep up on all the pertinent training that's going on in law enforcement. I also believe in the exposure to public and communities in outreach programs. I believe that whatever the sheriff's office is doing now, they should expand it to find out the ideas, concerns, and thoughts of the people that they serve. Plus, it will give the officers the opportunity to let the people know why they do the things that they do and what people should do during encounters with law enforcement and the deputies. During the other panel discussions, there was talk of the SWAT team. I really encouraged keeping the SWAT team and that training up. And a perfect example of that is what happened this week in Gallatin, New York. Trevor brought up about the defensive tactics, de-escalating skills, arrest techniques, including nonviolent restraint techniques should be practiced on a regular basis. I believe that Trevor had hit the point rather well. And I can say from my personal experience, I was trained in that almost every year, but you would forget the techniques because you only did it once a year. So there's got to be a better way of training. And I believe during the sheriff's office has in-service training every year. And I know that training, I hope they include mental health, substance abuse, and domestic violence issues in those training sessions. There was talk about no-knock endorsements on warrants. That should be kept up only because it's a safety factor for everybody involved when a warrant is executed. Not all warrants have it. That is based, and that is signed off by a judge. And last, but the last 10 seconds, I just want to say, keep the school and their officers going, because that contact is invaluable for the youth of our community. Thank you. I'm sorry I rambled on.
It's okay, Bill. You really said it. Thank you. Okay. Next, we're going to hear from Marvin Reidman. Am I saying your name correctly? From Canaan. You need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Okay. Yes, you got it right. And good evening, everyone. I'm Marvin Reidman. I've been a homeowner in this county since 1996, and fortunate to have a home in this county in the last 8 months. In our community, I'm a 15-year member of the fire department, and as such, I interacted and still do with both the sheriff's department and the state police. And it doesn't compare to some of the real potent issues that have been expressed by panelists this evening and on other evenings. However, I had some thoughts that I'd like to share with you, because I have almost a 50-year history in pre-hospital care and medical areas. And as such, I've had a lot of interaction. For these years, I've been an active player in New York City in the Regional Emergency Medical Services Council, which is a body that's created under Article 30 of the Public Health Law. And as a member of the council and as a member of the board of directors, we get to see a lot. On the council are members of the New York City Police Emergency Services Unit. And about 8 years ago, one of the things that we created for them was a tactical medic program. And the value of that, and the reason I brought it to this group tonight, this was a good example of cross-training. Cross-training in high-risk areas, because most of what was the directive of this unit for this kind of training was to not involve the normal street medics in the city in situations that were deemed to be potentially dangerous, and sometimes were dangerous. It seems to me that there's a great interest in bringing a third party to mental health calls, domestic dispute calls, and so on. And the temptation is there. I think there's probably an opportunity here to consider some cross-training for some of the sheriff's deputies. And I guess the focus here on the sheriff's department has to do with it being the largest law enforcement unit in the county. I think people that I've met have both the intellect and the interest in doing more. And I really have, Sheriff, I have to tell you, the people on your department that I've met have been very good. It's nice to know they're out there. And I'm sure there are probably one or two that don't quite fit in there, but I haven't met them. I think the ability to cross-train could be very important. I'm not sure how we would create a system that would allow for a mental health professional or a social worker to respond to this type of call. And it would still require the presence of at least one police officer, if not two. And depending upon the nature of the call and whether or not the source of the call was a frequent flyer, it might be more than that. I think it's a great idea. I think we need some of that kind of input, but I would encourage us to think about duality of training. And the last thing I'd like to say is I am totally against police defunding. I think it's not a solution. I think it will exacerbate issues that already exist. There needs to be more flexibility in training, more money for training, more sophistication in some of the programs. And I know that scheduling officers off duty on duty time for training is a bear. And I'm happy to say I don't have to be responsible for anybody's scheduling. I'm happy that you considered having me on the panel. It was good participating with you. And I look forward to seeing some more work out of this.
Thank you, Marvin, for your ideas to contribute. We are going to take another shorter break. Can we make this 3 minutes rather than 5, since we seem to be moving along pretty good? So let's make it a 3-minute break. I will change the clock, and then we'll get back and we'll hear from Bob Laporta's up next, okay? You can hear me now? Good. Bob Laporta?
Yes,
you
I'm
are
here.
From Claverack, right?
Yes, I am from Clover. Can you hear me okay?
You're nice and loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, my name's Robert Laporta, and I'm from Clover, and I'm retired associate professor from Columbia Green. And I'd like to thank the Board of Supervisors for giving me the opportunity to participate. I also want to thank Sheriff Bartlett, the members of the Sheriff's Office, and all law enforcement officials in the county. Their job is challenging at best, and they do an outstanding job. The primary focus of law enforcement is to keep the community they serve safe. And this is completed in many ways, not just in enforcing the laws. It is also accomplished by fostering positive relationships with all members of the community. In 2019, there were 6 sergeants and 42 full-time deputies responding to over 14,600 calls. This is a highly active department handling this volume of calls with this number of full-time deputies. After reading the 2019 annual report, I must say I was impressed with the myriad of community outreach programs supported by this organization, all designed to meet the needs of the community while developing positive relationships with all of its members. After watching previous 2 panels and listening to community members in other venues, it's obvious that the police forces in the whole country are painted unfairly with a broad brush due to the unacceptable behaviors of a few. I've experienced this firsthand when I returned from Vietnam and encountered the same broad brush sweeping statements about how horrible all veterans were. It's taken many years to correct this injustice, and I personally feel that the effort is a little, too late. I do not think that we should automatically assume that change is a requirement. Rather, gather information as to the function and scope of policing in the county and look for ways to improve this organization for all people who live, work, and visit this county. Let me respond to a few of the suggestions I heard presented. I've heard members of the committee say that the sheriff's office should not provide resource officers to high schools and colleges. Resource officers came about after devastating school shootings and are a necessity in this current society. School resource officers not only maintain safety, they provide a positive interaction with all students. This positive interaction helps develop trust and confidence in law enforcement, necessary in today's unsettled society. I've also heard that mental health professionals should be included in all calls where mental health issues are a concern. After reading the questions and answers tab on the police reform website and talking to members of the Hudson Police Department, I learned that this is already taking place. I think it is good to include these professionals because mental health issues are on the rise. However, a police presence is still required. Another issue floated around is banning the use of military-style equipment in policing. Let me try to explain why I do not support this ban. I know that on its face, it looks like an overreaction to a situation, and you could never imagine why this type of material would be necessary. I believe that when this material is deployed, the situation is grave, and the threat assessment shows that a loss of life is a real possibility. This material is not used in a traffic stop or investigating a home invasion or burglary, only those situations that warrant the use. And I feel that this is another tool in the toolbox when police are called upon to put their lives on the line. I am a firm believer in continuous improvement throughout life and work. With that said, I believe all police officers should undergo rigorous evaluations for performance and temperament. Officers who are unsuited or unable to do the job should receive assistance before a major event occurs. Warning signals are there if you know where to look and how to find them. I am also a supporter of police review boards that can shed light on the pulse of the community and provide valuable insight and assistance with community policing. This board needs to be carefully selected so as not to undermine the effectiveness of the police, rather as a resource to support and enhance the department's effectiveness. We keep hearing daily about defunding the police, and this is an extremely dangerous position to take. Reducing the police force and limiting their effectiveness just emboldens the criminal element to become more active. We have seen a spike in violence in all of our major cities where this position has taken root. At times, police are called upon to deal with violent criminal element. Limiting police effectiveness is a recipe for increased criminal activity that will affect officers, residents, and visitors alike. Is change needed? Yes, but the suggested change needs to make this organization more effective without removing or altering the positive aspects and mission of this organization. Thank you for the opportunity to share these comments, and I will send this into the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Okay. Megan Reinhardt from Philmont, you're up next.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Meg. Over the past few years, I have stored 245 gallons of water, food for 25 years, a fire escape ladder, and 2 go bags. I'm trained in CPR, first aid, citizen emergency response triage, fire starting, and debris huts. I'm a doomsday prepper, and yes, we are having our moment. I'm also a social worker by training. Originally from Georgia, I developed a curriculum that was accredited by Georgia Post on the signs of commercial sexual exploitation of children. I coordinated the training of over 2,000 officers and got to work with some of the best cops in the field. We collaborated with Dallas PD in adopting a best practice called the Facet Funnel. Sergeant Facet showed us that kids with repeat runaways were most at risk for being exploited. Officers took notes and began implementing our recommendations, but these cases were not prioritized. We heard from officers who were not allowed to focus on the cases despite stacks of leads. What was prioritized? Cars, broken headlights, marijuana, and speeding, because those tickets brought in cash for the city. Looking back at that work, I wish we had done more to get community involved with where and how daily operations of police were prioritized. I put on my Facet goggles, my doomsday solar headlamp, and I've analyzed 22 cases to prepare for this panel. I've looked at details leading up to the death, officer history, how they were killed, aftercare at the scene, 911 calls, and footage from the scenes. My first recommendation is a ban on being petty and stopping people for petty crimes. Why are there more cops than deer on the Taconic? Do we have a speeding problem? If so, what is what we're doing helping? I don't believe we can afford to spend so much time on policing petty crime. Alima Bonza has alleged sex trafficking and sexual assault, but I don't see a statement of investigation. And I call for more accountability for all accusations brought forward by Jago Hudson. The cop who killed Philando Castile said over the radio, "The driver looks more like one of our suspects just because of the wide-set nose." Castile had been stopped by the police at least 49 times in 13 years for minor traffic and equipment violations, the majority of which were dismissed. Walter Scott, it was a non-functioning third brake light. Elijah McClain, looking suspicious. Michael Brown, walking down the middle of the street. George Floyd, a fake $20. Eric Garner, a cigarette. Following the murder of Walter Scott, Philadelphia City Council announced they are banning police stops for motor vehicle code violations, including for broken taillights or failure to come to a complete stop. I recommend we do the same and add other petty crimes to the list. Let's map our inefficiencies and identify where we really do need more safety resources. Secondly, early intervention system or hazard risk assessment. This is the first thing you do when you prep. In prepping, this would be identifying your flood risk, your proximity to a fault line, etc. And policing, what are the risk factors that officers who shoot Black people have? Here's what I see so far. Civilian complaints or internal affairs investigations, whether or not they are sustained. Siger, who shot Walter Scott, had 2 taser without cause civilian complaints. Chauvin, 17 internal investigations. On that note, we need an easy way for civilians to file complaints, and those need to be sent to the Public Safety Committee. Secondly, civil rights settlements. Pentelia, who strangled Eric Garner, was the subject of 2 civil rights lawsuits. Tao, 104, who murdered Floyd, was a part of a settlement that cost Minneapolis $25,000. I also see transitions between departments like its musical chairs. Additionally, known to make racist, homophobic, or transphobic remarks in the community. We need to know officers see a valuable human, no matter who they respond to. Sean Matarazzo can be seen in a heartwarming video playing basketball with a group of Black kids. Next, he's in a video killing Daniel Prude, and then his high school classmates come out and say, "Oh yeah, we knew he made verbal racist remarks." Reviewing the tapes, I hear laughing and a repeated lack of CPR, including Kayla Moore, who was a trans woman they referred to as it. My third recommendation is a ban on no-knock warrants. Do we want to ban this now, or do we want taxpayers to pay $12 million in settlements later, like the city of Louisville? Fourth, jail transparency. We need to remove blind spots where people are getting beat up, humanize daily treatment, forward all grievances to Public Safety Committee. I have other recommendations that I will submit in my written statement. I have 2 final concluding thoughts. I'd like to address who has spoken on the panel and who hasn't. Page 110 of the NYS Police Reform calls to engage residents who have had interactions with police and residents who have been incarcerated. I urge the panel to do more to speak to those directly impacted communities. Finally, I want to address this doesn't happen here. If that is true, great, but I'm only hearing this from law enforcement or white people. We have heard from BIPOC panelists that we do have a problem. The data shows that in Columbia County, Black people are almost 4 times as likely to be arrested. Let's stop saying this doesn't happen here and get to work until we can say this couldn't happen here. If you would like to join me and others to work together on this, please email citizensofhudson@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And if you have more remarks than that, or even those remarks, please please make sure we get those in. Okay. Okay. Malcolm Nance from Stockport. You're our last presenter today. Are you? There you are. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. All right. All right, great. I'm glad to be here. My name is Malcolm Nance. If you don't know who I am, that's a good thing. I'm from Stockport, New York. I've been living here since, or let me rephrase that, I've got a residence here since 2007. For those of you who don't know, I work on the national scale with regards to counterterrorism, intelligence, and law enforcement regarding external threats to the United States. However, I have trained a lot of law enforcement in my time over the last 20 years. I've trained 3 entire different state Homeland Security intelligence agencies, everyone in the New York State SWAT teams in counterterrorism and street level threats. So why am I here, right? Because not only have I had to do that or had to give that level of training on a very large scale, I'm also, when I was in the military, I was a tactical teams officer trained person who went with the Capitol Hill Police when they formed their first SWAT units. And, you know, I know a little bit of something about it, but I am not a police officer. But I have some ideas about some of the issues that we have. First, I'm going to be very informal about this. I've been watching, you know, the last 2 panels, and I think it's great that we have so much community involvement. And that's the first thing. I know a lot of law enforcement officers, and one of the biggest problems that they have today is the very fact that someone in the community wants any measure of accountability. The big mindset change that we need to have in law enforcement, certainly here in Columbia County, and I've met many of these great deputies and police officers that we have here in Hudson, in my little village. You need to have the mindset that you are accountable to the public. And this is where some of the issues that have happened on the national level in Minneapolis and St. Louis have occurred. The mindset of, I am a law enforcement officer, I have total immunity, is just got to be done away with. I spent 20 years in the U.S. military. I spent 15 years in the U.S. intelligence community. At every level of everything that I did, there was always someone accounting for my actions. No one is immune. Even in combat situations. I'm a combat veteran. You have accountability at all times. I think what we have a problem is that there's a mindset that sort of has permeated law enforcement since 9/11. And that I've actually seen people write about this and lecture on it, the warrior officer mindset. No, I am a warrior. I am a combat veteran. This is what I do. I go around the world. I fight America's enemies. The people who are here in the United States, law enforcement officers, are here to serve the community. And we need to move back perhaps through some level of training, and hopefully we don't have to legislate it, to get people to understand that their mindset should be they are here to serve the community, even though at some times there may be points where incidents escalate into violence. This has led to a loss of trust. And that is the most important thing that you can do in your day-to-day job, is to have the trust of the community. I trust the 3 officers we have here in Stockport. I've met them. I've seen them. Great people. Love them. I've seen the sheriff's deputies out in the street here. It's a hard job, all right, patrolling all these areas that we have. But with the incidents that have occurred on a national scale, you are finding that those 1 or 2 bad officers, and to be quite honest, some really awful police unions, have pushed the issue of trust in you as law enforcement officers pretty much into the garbage. That is going to have to be built up from the street level up. So again, change in attitude. One of the attitude changes that you have to understand that people are a little concerned with is the very fact that officers in some instances behave differently towards Black people than they do white people. They see guns with related to African Americans as an incident for them to go to guns and empty their weapons. With a white person, they feel that they're just good old boys who have guns. There has to be a universal balancing of how officers go towards people in their day-to-day jobs, so that you don't have officers who are taking out their weapons and emptying 2 magazines into a civilian who had a reason for having a firearm. But I don't think that's an issue here in this county, but it's something that has to be taken care of. I worked with, in the Middle East, where I lived for 20 years, with British officers. And I found that their attitude of politeness, but readiness, is something that we should really take into hand also. Finally, no one's defunding the police.
Thank you. Thank you, Malcolm.
You're welcome.
That was a nice way to end that. Megan, can you give that website address again? We have people on YouTube asking for it, if you don't mind reciting it slowly.
Sure. Actually, I shared an email account. It's citizensofhudson@gmail.com.
Oh, that's what, I'm sorry, I meant the email. Citizens of Hudson?
And citizensofhudson.org.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank everyone. Does anybody want the floor to answer any questions or answers here tonight, or we want to wait till the next panel? Anybody?
I do have a question from someone that wrote in.
Okay, Sherry.
Terry Sullivan writes, wants to know what has been done in terms of recruitment of minorities and women in recent years in the Columbia County Sheriff's Department and the Hudson Police Departments.
Sheriff, do you want to take that now?
Yeah, absolutely. We go out to community events. We've worked with programs down in the city of Hudson to try and recruit females and people of color. At the end of the day, as I discussed before with panel members, we have to get the people to be able to take the civil service test, to score high enough on the civil service test so they're reachable. I've gone out many times. I have some great females that work here. I have great Latinos. I have great Black people that work here. And whoever we can hire as far as candidates, they've got to score high in those tests to be able to be reached.
Bill, do you have anything to add?
And then, of course, at the end of the day, too, we have a very stringent background investigation that we do. And they've got, people have to remember that when they do come into law enforcement, that we do look into your background and we do see what's going on. And I tell my kids, watch what you're doing, because at some point, whatever may come down, it may get you. And it's stuff to remember and stuff to think about when you're interviewing for any job. It's qualified candidates are really look into those to make sure we have the top product coming out on the streets.
Mr. Chairman, what I would like to add is when I was on the Board of Supervisors, we did start a program called LEDI, Law Enforcement Diversity Initiative, and it was being run by Greg Mosley. That program went by the wayside. So the sheriff was making efforts then. Since I left, I haven't been familiar with what was going on the local level. But what I will tell you now is those talks are ongoing, and I'm pretty positive that something is going to come out of that along with this panel. I've been working with the sheriff, you, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Abdus Mia. So I'm looking forward to what comes out of the next panel discussions, because I believe this is going to be one of the topics that's going to be in the forefront.
No, you're muted.
Yeah. Sherry, do we have any other questions from the folks who are
No, that's what I've received so far.
any questions from the panelists that you'd want to raise here, other than what we've covered so far tonight? Because remember, all this input is going forward.
So, no, if I could, I would like to ask a question of Malcolm if he's still on.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm here.
And Phyllis,
Okay.
I'd like to
So, you mentioned something about the policing using weapons on Black individuals versus individuals in the white community. I'm sure you have some ideas around that, and if you could just, because I know we're on another panel, you and I are together, but if you could shed a little bit of light on what your idea may be around how we can change some of that mentality around that.
Sure, and I'll be brief about this. I'm also a firearms trainer, and have been, my entire career has been around dealing with use of force in a combat setting. One of the things that is being studied now by Quantico is the incidence of use of force by officers and just how quickly they escalate to the use of lethal force. Some of the issues that have permeated throughout law enforcement that have created sort of this mindset is I can actually tell you precisely what they are. One is a video that started circulating in the 1980s on the use of knives and shanks inside of prisons. And it showed that a person with a knife can close 21 feet on an officer and stab them no less than 3 times before an officer can draw his gun. There's not a person in, I don't think there's a law enforcement officer in the United States who hasn't seen that video, which is why you now see a knife being drawn as considered equal to a firearm in terms of use of force. The point is that I think there needs to be a lot more training about how you get to that level of escalation of threat. I mean, it's a question of spacing, and that's also another thing that law enforcement does training on. So that is just one of the components why we just had that shooting in Philadelphia where you had a mentally ill individual, but it does, you're not going to bring a social worker to the field. And it's nice that people want to bring mental health components into this, but unfortunately, we've deigned that law enforcement is now the frontline mental health workers in the United States. And if somebody takes out a knife, that video pops into their mind, and their use of force training shows that knives are considered lethal weapons, therefore they engage. The problem is how much they're engaging. They are shooting 10 to 15 shots in a circumstance where when I was living in Baghdad, I would have fired 2 and reevaluated. And this is where you have one officer sees another officer engaging and he empties his magazine, which is why with Amadou Diallo, you had 48 shots fired, which is insane. In the first Battle of Fallujah, we didn't shoot that much. So I'm just saying this warrior mindset, which again has developed since 2001, and also law enforcement officers going to the lectures on the book on killing, which is supposed to make them comfortable with using lethal force engagements, that has changed the mindset of how law enforcement works in the United States. A lot of them will say it doesn't, but the training in firearms needs to be limited, and the mindset of who you're going to shoot, how you're going to shoot, and how many times you're going to shoot absolutely has to be changed. I don't know how they're doing it in this county, but I think it's something which I think the sheriff might want to review, if only to save ammunition expenditures.
I have a follow-up question.
Well, Phyllis Granite had one first. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Stay with me. You need to unmute yourself.
Phyllis, wait for you.
You're muted, Phyllis. You're still muted. Okay.
Hover down at the bottom and hit the microphone.
Hit that little microphone button.
Phyllis, find the microphone icon.
I got it.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Okay, my question is to the to Sheriff Bartlett, and part of what you have just said is, could he please tell us what the trainings have been this past year, and has it encompassed any of these issues?
Phyllis, what issues are you talking about?
I'm talking about what is the training that the police, the sheriff's deputies and the police have gotten this year? What were the topics that they were offered and what training did they participate in?
We do thousands of hours of training here, literally. Right now I'm looking at workplace, just a couple that we've done as far as regular stuff, as far as firearms and so on and so forth. Workplace violence and bullying, law enforcement ethics, ethics in the workplace, implicit bias, anti-bullying, anti-bias policing, mental health overview and awareness.
And what percentage of the force has taken any one of these?
100%.
Each patrolman has taken each of these courses?
Yes, ma'am.
Very interesting, very, very positive to know that, yes.
Yeah, we've got our regular training that we do, and we also, a year or so ago, we bought a new program that allows us to get some other training out to officers as well as hands-on and face-to-face. So there's a lot of training that does go on here. I mean, accreditation calls for a certain amount, but that's peanuts to what a real police officer should get. There's a lot of training that goes on here, and every single person is mandated to take it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, sure.
Thank you.
Megan, you have another question?
Yeah, I was wondering if Malcolm, if you or anyone else has seen something of an international best practice out of Japan, where instead of using a gun, they use a blanket, and they call it a sushi roll or burrito roll, and it's used to de-escalate in a safe way someone who is drunk, or it could be basically an alternative to not needing to use a weapon. And I think it's important for us to look at other international ways and how other professions also do de-escalate without a weapon.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's a very interesting technique. However, the problem that we have here in the United States, and I'll be quite frank with it, especially as someone who's well versed in this, we have just too damn many guns in this country, and this is where law enforcement has had to rise to their level of escalation of threat. When they see a person who's drunk and combative, or drunk and non-compliant, until they can actually gain control of them, they don't know whether that's going to escalate into a gun battle. We just had that circumstance here where officers responded to a little old lady's house, and shots were fired. It's just a component of our culture that is always going to make this inherently dangerous. And I can respect that, and I think that officers, of course, have to take all chance, all training and accountability for that, so that they, of course, go home to their families. The question is, in other circumstances where you escalate to that threat, in circumstances where you could back away. Problem is, a common practice now is to never de-escalate, but is to escalate with higher levels of use of force, physical force, tasering, as opposed to backing away, which is, I know, just not in their playbook, or calm speech, or things that you might see come from the social work community. Again, our problem is that because we have so many guns here and so easy access to guns, it puts officers on this precarious position where they can't really be as polite as a Japanese or British police officer who might be trying to throw a net over you or a sushi blanket and roll you up, because while you're throwing that blanket, someone could be, drawing out a semi-automatic weapon and engaging in a firefight. So it's something we have to see. But my biggest problem here is inherent bias, which is where officers see a Black person and they have a completely different mindset about guns towards them, as opposed to a drunk white person who may actually be brandishing a gun, waving a gun, pointing a gun, and saying, well, that guy doesn't really mean it. And we see examples of that happening all the time.
Could I maybe chime in on this one? I have traveled a lot, and I do agree that de-escalation techniques, whether it's in Holland or in Japan or in the UK, it's much easier given the lack of possession of weapons. It is changing though. In the UK, there's a big knife issue. The police is changing their approach. They're not just blowing the whistle anymore and saying, stop doing this. They're getting more armor. They're getting more physical. Holland, the same thing. There's more weapons there. I don't think we want to blame this on the US police. I think it's a weapon issue to start with. The second point I want to make, sort of the possession of weapons. The second issue here is, I think that a lot of discussions that we've had so far is about when a police officer is actually physically engaging with someone of the community. I would dare to say that 99.9% of the time, the police officers are not pulling weapons and shooting. They're doing a lot of other good things. And I feel a little bit that we're underemphasizing all the good things that are taking place, whether it's traffic control. I'm a cyclist, right? I see often police officers making sure that people are not speeding, that there are traffic signs that are repaired when they fall over in the storm. All these things are underemphasized in the discussions that we had in the last 3 panels. I do think it would be fair and balanced if we also point out where the good things taking place, and it would be fair and balanced to say, hey, the firearms issue is not necessarily a Columbia County issue or starting with the police. It also starts with the possession of weapons. So I just want to make the statement at the end of the third panel that I feel strongly that the bias of the discussion has been on a very small segment of what the police is actually doing and contributing to our county. And we should not forget about all the other things that actually are positive and where there's no racial element to it and where the police is actually out there for our benefits and our safety. So just wanted to make that statement given the focus of the discussion in the last couple of minutes.
Just one quick comment to that. You're right. The issue as it appears with law enforcement in Europe is very different from the United States. I've been to Holland. I've trained in Belgium. I've trained in France. I have trained with armed security officers in London with the Met. And they have a completely different mindset. And it's changing because of the level of the threat based on the types of individuals they're dealing with, which is Islamic extremists. The only reason most Met officers in London do not have firearms. They walk around with a nightstick. They have armed security, armed response officers for that. 99% of what is happening with law enforcement is great. Okay. We're not talking about that 99%. We're talking about the 1%. And the incident that occurred recently with the citizen firing a weapon as sheriff's deputies responded I think that it would, in some circumstances, people may feel that it would end completely differently if it took place at 3rd and State Street in Hudson, where there's a different demographic. And so the question here is this accountability at a state level for us to review as citizens how officers are going to respond and will respond in the future, and it is one of the things that we should all encourage and appreciate.
Agree.
Thank you, Malcolm, for one of the issues the next panel really is going to need to grapple with for bringing that up. Is there anything else we really haven't covered here tonight that you feel is missing before we move on to the next set of panels, which will happen December 2nd and 3rd, if I'm remembering my dates correctly? Matt or Mike, is that correct? Is that your memory of what it is?
December 2nd and 3rd, correct. And we've scheduled 2. It may take more than 2 panels, which will, if it does, we'll schedule some other panel or future panels as well. But because I believe that the law enforcement and elected officials panel, it's basically going to be a lot of work in going through the information and putting together, a coherent plan.
Thanks, Matt. Mike, do you want to add anything, or?
I just want to thank, the 30 plus people that were involved in these community panels, and not just them, also the people who participated on YouTube, sent in questions. I'm sure more questions will be forthcoming. In the next panels, I expect we still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of good information that we've obtained from the community. So very happy with how this has gone so far.
Thank you. Bill, I'm going to let you have the last word.
Well, I'll let Mike stand. I think this was a great discussion, and I look forward to the next panels coming up.
Great. Well, again, thank you all for making time for this tonight, and look forward to what we're going to explore next. So thanks again for
Well,
your
if I
time.
could have 1 second.
You
Yeah.
certainly can, Sheriff.
Yeah, thank you. Number one, I wanted to thank everybody for coming. We're absolutely open to any ideas and new suggestions here. Policing does need to change with the times. We're getting a lot of feedback on the typing section, I guess, of this YouTube. Let me clarify as far as the training hours. They said thousands of hours. That's the entire department. You know, baseline officers, they're 100 hours or so, if not a little more. Specialty SWAT teams, canines, divers, etc. They would get a lot more on top of that. But there's been a lot of chit chat on the chat boxes that are going back and forth. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I'm sorry for the beard. For those of you who don't know, we do a No Shave November for the Columbia County Community Cancer Fund. And so that's why the deputies that you see are looking a little scruffy. So, but that's why we do it for November. We raise quite a lot of money for the community cancer.
Newell, you're on mute. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thanks again, and we'll call it a night.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
We
Great
appreciate
work.
your time.